Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Student of the Game. I am Kyle Nass, the Student of the Game. And listen, if you're here, chances are you like talking sport, and there's a very high likelihood you're trying to distract yourself from Hurricane BS as Hurricane Milton is making its way through the Florida area. Central Florida, whatever. Good God, good gravy. Already another hurricane. We're still trying to figure out Helene, and here comes this thing. Anyways, with that in mind, hope those of you that are stuck in harm's way there survive well and stay safe throughout the storm and have minimized impact. And one of those people who will be impacted, and I hope stays safe with minimized impact, my good friend Andrew Gluchov, Last Word on Sports, covering UCF. How you doing, my friend?
Here in Bradenton, Florida, which is right now a hot spot for this hurricane, coming at you. And hey, we've battened down the hatches. We have hurricane grade impact glass. We are here, and we're gonna see where this thing goes.
Yes, I certainly all my well wishes for the coming Hurricane Milton aren't a knee-jerk reaction. Anyway,
well, I mean, in fairness, it is the name of my wife's grandfather, so there's some sort of family revenge going on.
My bad, I got mixed up. Sorry, my
revenge.
Yeah, right. Here we go, man. Listen, of course, the chaos early that always ensued when the two of us get together on the show, man. It's good to have you back. And listen, it was a conversation. This is one of these things where I happen to be calling up Andrew Gluchov. I forget what prompted the call. Oh, yeah, I remember what prompted the call exactly. We were talking UCF stuff, but specifically the anomaly, I shouldn't say anomaly, the practice with what's going on with red shirts in this world of NIL. And I had made the comment that with all the people clutching their pearls, and since Drew and I both cover UCF, this isn't a UCF show per se, but I think Drew and I are going to make national statements here using UCF as a case study. So we're not homering here. This could apply to any college in the nation. Let me say that up front. But I remember it was first at the Citrus Bowl when Leonard Fournette was one of the first players to be a big story about opting out of a bowl game to prepare for the NFL. And then 5 years later, at the same site, I asked Iowa coach Kirk Ferentz, the oldest active coach in college football right now, how he handled that and how much that had all kind of gone away. And the reason why I mention those things is I can speak to authority to those two occurrences because I was there. I also was the one that asked Coach Ferentz that question, so there's that. But I think we're still, Drew, in that kind of pearl clutching phase of people don't know what to think yet when these players use that 4-game window to kind of see what's going on and then opt out with intent to transfer, because that's a thing that's been declared in this particular instance. And do you think that everybody at large is still kind of getting I'll put it this way. You're still seeing fan reaction going from the shocked and sad to the downright inappropriate out there.
I mean, you're getting the 5 degrees of acceptance.
There you go.
The with all the grief and everything. Here's truth. You're seeing a few different avenues all kind of crossing at this point. Because you talked about the bowl game, and opting out of the bowl game wasn't as much of a big deal because bowl games are exhibition games. Sure. Now you're talking regular season stuff. This is actually where it counts. This is where your scholarship actually applies to. So you have, they changed the red shirt rules from originally you can only play within the first 3 quarters within the first 4 games, or you burn your red shirt. To now just any 4 games if you have an appearance. So now that you've introduced the Wild West of NIL, and it's unregulated format, which, by the way, major news happened today. This is Monday night. Major news happened where the judge in the House versus NCAA case has given a preliminary acceptance of the settlement. The NCAA didn't change anything. They just clarified things. So the original agreement is going to happen. So that's going to start supposedly this process in 2026 where we're going to see this pool of money being put together to actually start compensating these players directly.
Let's table that for a second, because I love you're going full squirrel here, but I want to dissect that separately because I hadn't heard about that either. So I have a question. But
it just came down the pipe today after we talked about our other stuff.
That's funny.
So to get back to the original subject, since a squirrel, because it's very easy for someone with ADOS, attention deficit, ooh shiny, to get distracted. You add in the world of NIL, and now players are realizing they can use this red shirt year. They don't have the transfer limitations anymore. All limitations have been lifted. And I had a conversation with my dad about this last night. And he's of the old school, you should have one free transfer and then, and I disagree, because scholarships are by and large, there are a few multi-year ones, but by and large, they're 1 year scholarships. They're renewed every year. So if you have a 1 year contract that just gets renewed, at the end of that contract, should you be allowed to move on to somewhere else? And I say absolutely. It causes havoc on a program, which is why I think removing the spring transfer portal period is good for the having this stuff in having these two portal windows is difficult. It doesn't work well. And, these guys are going into the spring game, they're playing, and then they're leaving. That's bad for business. That's bad for the programs. And it doesn't really, it creates too much chaos. You extend the current winter one just a little bit, and you allow that to work. And I think it can balance out. But with this new kind of mercenary-like philosophy, you have to ask, do we need to look and consider revising the red shirt policies? Because when they were created for a different environment compared to what we have today.
It used to be still the law. I mean, let's make it about that. Yeah.
Well, the law is the law. If you don't like the law, change the law. But until the law is changed, you have to follow the law. Right. So that's what's going on right now. The rules say, any 4 games. So, player plays 4 games. I'm opting out. I'm gonna red shirt. But here's the thing. We've had a big paradigm shift. It's gone from the program being in control to the player being in control. So when the player says, all right, I'm done, the program has no recourse. So there obviously something has to give to kind of balance this out, because now players can essentially hold programs hostage.
Yeah.
And materially damage them by saying, 4 games. Yeah, I'm done. See ya. Bye.
There's that, and other aspects too have kind of popped up too, just as an example of other things that are kind of cropping up. The UNLV quarterback situation, where the agreement was all nutty because there was a he said she said about what was signed for legally, or actually nothing was signed for.
That was a calamity of multiple things that went wrong.
Right. But basically, to punchline it, it's just another example of something that could go wrong. And I mentioned that to say, back in the day when this exchange was where you were the host on the OT with Andrew G, and I was the co-host back in 2012 to 2014 era, we warned you, Humpy Bumpies, of things like this, but you didn't listen. We tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. Just had to get that victory lap in there, Andrew Gluchov. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, think of this like buying a house. The general rule: if it's not in the contract, it doesn't exist. Right. There was never a deal signed over at UNLV. There was no contract. There was no nothing. So the fact that they went on this, basically the coach could tell you whatever the heck he wants. I mean, he could feed you a whole bunch of BS.
It's an a-hole move, but he can do it. Correct. Yeah.
It's a total jerk move. I mean, whatever, the coach's role is not to get you money. The coach's role is to get you to join, because until the schools take NIL in-house, no pun intended, because the house settlement's going to set this up.
I see what you did there, Drew Gluchov.
No pun intended, but that's where they're going, because they're going to eventually try to get rid of collectives and bring it in, because having it as an outside organization, that's where this incident came from, because there was a disconnect. So if you bring it into the school, you get oversight. You get, the NCAA can oversee it. The school can then see what, oversee what's going on, and it protects against situations like this where the program does one thing and the collective does something different. They don't jive, and as a result, you have egg on your face. A player has left, and at one point the collective was ready to give him the money that he wanted, but by that point the program said no, the relationship's too damaged. That would have prevented this whole thing, but there's a lot of this is just a preliminary thing. There's a lot of moving parts, but in the case of the school that we cover, UCF, it creates a lot of unique opportunities being on the have side versus the have not side, which is still very new for that school.
So let's take it into this though, and you mentioned the have and have nots and all the factors, and I think the fans are still kind of adjusting to players just being able to kind of slide the trap door, pull the rug out from under. From the fan is short for fanatic, so when they do that to a program, the fans take that personally, and I think it's still because they're not used to it, right? And some of these compromises that have been thrown out there is to, and I was just talking about this actually with Eric Lopez on the Night Shift Live, powered by the Black and Gold Banneret. I
missed the bing.
It's funny. You weren't the first Cleveland guy to say that. I actually had Casey from the Barking Browns podcast on here, and when I introduced the bell that Jim got me, he said, "Where's the bing?" So I did. I do take requests. I will use the verbal bing heretofore, Drew.
Come on, we go way too far for you to have that imposter here.
So see, Drew obviously sided with Paul Bunyan over the locomotive, and I'm okay with that. That's fine.
Toot.
No, sir. You aren't a Purdue fan, anyways. No, but
don't.
I see what you did there. What's being thrown out there is a permanent, just 5 years, a 5-year window. Now, one thing I get immediately concerned about with that scenario is, are they encompassing injury red shirts in that? Because if they aren't, I hate it. Even if they are, that becomes wildly more complicated, because now, get this, there's some corruption out there in college football. I know, Drew, clutch your pearls, but but I get worried then that, you'll pardon this, no pun intended here, but that certain health documents that might be necessary to prove a medical red shirt may be doctored. See what I did there? That makes me concerned. The proposal, the thing I would propose over the 5-year flat thing would be, if you've played 4 games in, and once it started, you can redshirt to preserve yourself for another year of eligibility, but you can't transfer until the next season, right? I think this is something to where, there has to be, if you're going to redshirt after the 4 games and preserve eligibility, I feel like that's something that is where you start the compromise for me, because
you can't mid-year transfer. You can't mid-year transfer.
Hear me out. The reason kids are transferring is so they get that year of eligibility back. If we take that off the table, where they can keep that year of eligibility only at the local program that they're with, I think that kind of prevents the midseason bailout that we're talking about. Do you think that would be effective?
Well, to do any of that stuff would require some antitrust exemption protection from Congress, because that's what opened this whole mess up to begin with NIL. They had pieces in place to protect themselves, and a court in Tennessee threw it all out because they don't have those protections. If the NCAA, or even if the FBS breaks off, which the Knight Commission has said would be good for everyone involved, because the NCAA has so little to do with FBS football.
Right.
They don't make any money off it, despite what people think. Their job is a clearinghouse for regulatory matters and for certification of bowl games. Other than that, they don't do a whole lot. They don't involve themselves in the CFP. They're not involved with the actual operation of bowl games. Their job is a regulatory. It's not like the NCAA tournament where they actually host it, they make money. They don't make a dime off this. So the Knight Commission has actually pushed for FBS to be its own regulatory body because there's so many different parts with football compared to everything else. With that said, either one would still require some degree of antitrust exemption to be able to do this stuff, or else any move that you suggest would be up for litigation. And that's unfortunate because they that would clean up the sport a lot. But the NCAA is so vilified that no one wants to give them that. Yeah. Despite the fact that the sport actually needs them to have a degree of protection. People are like, oh, the SEC, Big Ten just break off from the NCAA, do their own thing. They don't want to do that.
They don't want to be responsible for the regulatory, right? I mean, that's another.
It's a lot of work, One of our former colleagues, Noah Goldberg, works, has been interning with the NCAA with some of their compliance stuff, and he knows there's a massive amount of overhead that would be needed to do this. You have to, aside from creating and enforcing the rules, you have the investigations. There's a lot of stuff that these conferences do not want to deal with. So a lot of it is posturing and just showing we can do it. We don't want to do it. Don't make us do it. And that's where the autonomy came into play. That's when the real power conferences. Before it was just, they get an audit, but now they actually have power. When they were able to start creating their own rules as far as how, football is operated. That was a result of fear from the NCAA of a breakoff. And they've played it a few times, and the NCAA has given some latitude to the power conferences to do these things, but in the end of the day, they don't want to break off. It's not worth it to them. So obviously something's going to have to give at some point. But we need to clean up the sport.
Yeah, you mentioned Congress. Another challenge too was all the in-state governments that have also reared their head and gotten involved. Florida among them, if I remember.
And that would take care of a lot of that problem. Look at what the ACC is dealing with. They have lawsuits in 2 states over this stuff. Giving them a national level protection. This is why the NFL doesn't get sued left and right for issues that they go, or Major League Baseball. They have this protection. Yeah. The NCAA does not. So as a result, you have 2 lawsuits going concurrently in North Carolina and in Florida, fighting over this, the opposite end of the same argument.
Oh my God.
Yeah. If you I got to plug Tony Siracusa on Last Word on Sports has been on the pulse. Hey, you give me a real bing right there. Bing. There you go. None of that, that charlatan nonsense. But seriously, he's been on the pulse. He covers Wake Forest. He's up in North Carolina, so he goes to those court cases. He's very much involved with the cases up there, and has been following very closely with what's been going on in Florida. And check out his work. He has a lot of in-depth stuff. He knows what's going on.
I assume.
Yeah, he's the managing editor of Last Word on Sports. I mean, he's done it all. He covered UCLA for decades upon decades. He's an All-American. He voter. He's on the FWA board of directors. I mean, he does it all.
But bring it back into what he was saying that drew you in to mention him.
Yeah, well, he's been covering this legal issue very closely.
Right. Okay. So, you're talking about the North Carolina case. Got it.
And and he's been covering the North Carolina case very, in person. He's been covering the Florida case remotely, but he's been very much involved with this because he's obviously covering the ACC, so he's very close to the conference, and the stakes are so high for what's going on with this case and the status of this conference.
Yeah, well, and of course, it's funny I think people are starting to mention, like you're saying, especially with that case with the ACC, that They're talking more settlement now. Now, granted, FSU falling flat on its face probably may have a little bit, loosely at least, to do with that. But I think that element that they're talking settlement is like you mentioned, they start to realize some of these, maybe not necessarily the regulatory body thing per se, but they come across this element in trying to reform the conference, reduce that, maybe
there's another X factor involved there. And I think they're starting to realize it because of how they handle this. Nobody really wants them.
That's where I was taking it. Exactly.
Yeah. They create a lot of bad will. This was not how to win friends and influence people. The SEC wants none of this noise. The Big Ten, Florida State's not up to their academic standards to begin with. They were never really all that interested in Florida State. So what are you going to go to? The Big 12? Florida State doesn't want to go to Big 12. They look down on the Big 12. So the best bet is to kind of, at least have a civil relationship with the ACC, rebuild some of that public,
vitriol.
And then see where things go towards the end of the contract, or when they can actually get out of it without having to go back to court. But the truth is the SEC is not really interested in expanding. They don't want to invest in Florida State. Florida State has proven to be a bad partner to work with. Who can trust them right now? Would you trust them with how they treated the ACC? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And who's going to renegotiate contracts? The Big 12 has a pro rata escalator with ESPN, and I'm sure they can get Fox to pay the same amount for a Florida State. But the truth is, they're not going to make more money as a conference by bringing Florida State in at the start of this new contract. It's not going to get renegotiated.
Right.
It could bring in more value at the next contract in 2031, but not right now. So there's really no value.
By then, the ACC contract will basically start to snuff out too. Then, right?
Well, there's an option for ESPN to re-up and continue their another 10 years on the deal, which I'm not sure what they're going to do at this point. It really depends how these court cases play out. But it's either 2026, it's 2036. It really depends. If everything plays out in the long-term play, 2036 is when that contract expires. I'm sure they could probably wedge a year ahead, much like Texas and Oklahoma did with the Big 12. They found a happy medium where everyone was satisfied. And, the big key was, and in the case this would be ESPN for the ACC, they were made whole. Fox in this case was made whole because they were the ones who actually lost. Right. Because Texas Oklahoma went to the SEC, which is all ESPN. Right. Big 12 is split. So some favors were made to Fox to give them some preferential treatment on some upcoming games to kind of make up for it as part of that settlement. So there's a lot of moving parts, but they can be convinced, these television networks, you just have to throw them a bone.
You got to make it worth their while. 100%. I'd also add too, I don't really think ESPN is going to re-up that deal simply because they have the opportunity to prune the tree of some of these ACC programs that should not get the dap that they do. I'm not necessarily mentioning names, Boston College, but I feel like there are certain programs out there that are not as great as their clout would imply.
Well, I always put Boston College in the same category as Iowa State, which is a G5 program dressed in P4 clothing.
Why got to diss my man Matt Campbell like that, though?
Because it's Iowa State, who's never had a 10-win season in their entire history.
Tell us how you really feel, Big Ten guy. Okay, Buckeye. There you go.
No, Iowa State's that redheaded stepchild from the from the Hawkeye state, and it's like, yeah, we have to acknowledge they exist, but we don't really have to look at them.
At least Iowa State can complete the forward pass. Anyway,
well, that's a Kirk Ferentz problem.
No, and listen, I say that with all the love in the world from Kirk Ferentz, because say what you will, those defenses are legit AF. Anyways, But let me bring it back to this. So we kind of touched on the player transfer thing, and I had opened the conversation by saying after 5 years, a certain practice is normalized. We were talking about players opting out of NIL. Let me ask you this. Do you think, as far as players becoming mercenaries in football, like transferring everywhere has been happening in the Olympic sports? It's just nobody watches college Olympic sports generally, so the public at large in general didn't care. Bring it to football, everybody's losing their mind, right? Fair or not, that's been the case. I'm sure you'll capitulate to that, Drew. But
it's the sport with the most notoriety.
Well, and it's not close. Absolutely,
it's not close.
It goes without saying. Like I tell people, I speak 3 sports languages now: football, NFL football, pro football, college football, and a distant third is the NBA, and I'm practicing on college college basketball.
You don't like baseball?
This guy, he's got jokes. OJ Otani. There, I named a baseball name for you. Okay, am I watching the playoffs? Hell no. Anyways, and there's no pitch you can give me. Anyways,
okay, soccer.
So hey, listen, football is a separate conversation. Anyways,
what's it played on? What's it played on?
A pitch. I see what you did there. So let me get back to it though. The notoriety of football has gotten people to start to notice how regular transfer is, and to kind of take the loyalty and part of what makes college football great and all the, my rivalries, whatever. Shut up. But in 5 years, or at least for the student athletes, do you feel like fans will become more accustomed and not clutch their pearls simply in the fashion that NFL prospects are opting out of bowl games? And you mentioned the point earlier that those are exhibitions versus regular season, but even still, being aware of it as a practice, hearing coaches talk about it in the preseason, hearing us as media people, reading us as media people, making them aware of it to where it's not such a knee-jerk reaction. Sorry for the pun again, Drew, but hey, bing, there you go. Do you think there's a day where that'll normalize?
Well, I think you're trading one thing for another thing. So, while one thing may normalize, now you have with NIL, the fans are investors. They donated money for these players.
Right.
And now they expect results. I paid X amount of dollars to the collective who paid Y amount of dollars to bring in this athlete, and he's not producing. Let's look at KJ Jefferson from UCF, because again, we're going to use a program that we cover. Was paid a hefty 6-figure sum. I'm not going to put it out there. You can, you and I know what it is. Anyone else can do the research. I'm not
that all the numbers are pretty damn high. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'm not going to put that number on your program. But fans who know how much it is have been extra upset because they don't feel like they're getting return on investment. Right. Now they've got skin in the game. It wasn't just a donation to the Golden Knights Club to handle the scholarship. Now you've basically bought the player's services through a contract. We talked about one of the players interviewing Quadric Bullard, and you asked a question about how we handle how the team handles the redshirting. But as I told you, what actually interests me was his answer to the follow-up question. Which I'm sorry, you asked about tackling. The question was about the redshirting, where he actually talked about how the players are viewed like NFL players. He's basically saying the quiet part out loud. Except the NFL, aside from that antitrust exemption protection, they also have multi-year contracts and other things that actually protect their rosters far more than anything the NCAA has been able to put together for NIL, which is why college sports has become such a wild west versus the attempt of parity that the NFL has. The teams aren't equal. Based on their roster, but the design is equal. these, this is your salary cap. You can manipulate it, but you have to do, roll prior year and all this other stuff. But here's your roster size. Here's your salary cap. Make the roster the way you want it, but it's a level playing field. There is no level playing field in college. It's whoever's got the most cheese,
right.
The mice come to.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's funny. Like, I've talked to heads and top guys in collective departments, or collective entities, I guess we would say, rather than departments. But
They'll eventually be a department.
Yeah, correct, right. But including SJ at UCF's Collective the Kingdom.
And if I'm correct, real quick before you get to next, I think he did make the point once that he would be okay if the school absorbed the collective. I think he actually said that once.
But I think all of that is case sensitive too, because then we get into public versus universities versus private universities, and then how public the books will be, and that's a whole other, accounting.
That's where the NCAA comes into play.
Yeah, and frankly, that's a different show, homie. But,
oh yeah, well, trust me, there's a lot to be worked out with this whole House settlement. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, man. Golly, we're already a half hour in, and I to be continued is what I'll say. Maybe I need to have a show with you and Matt Murschel of the Orlando Sentinel, or you and Tony Siragusa of Last Word on Sports, to really hash this out. But what I find interesting is, if you talk to the head of a collective, they hate hearing Wild Wild West, because they make efforts to bring in contracts, to very clearly define what it is that's being exchanged between them and the program, what it is that's happening, and all as much as they can control. But where I think the Wild Wild West element truly comes in isn't necessarily with the institutions themselves, though they're obviously doing some creative things to enact those things, or even get their branding out there, and certain marketing campaigns and things like that. Like, hey, pay somebody a bunch of money and you can get a spaces with an official at a school. Not that I'm mentioning any particular example, but the punchline being, I think where they kind of fall short, and this is the part we talked about years ago, is agents are getting craftier. They're finding different ways to help the students kind of manipulate the way through it. And I think the red shirt is the latest version of it. So in that way, it is the Wild
There's
Wild.
agents, period. Just a handful of years ago, that was unheard of.
Yeah.
The fact that there is now agents in
and the
play.
moment you let the sharks in the water is where the blood starts flowing. I think that's the point you and I made 10 years ago, right? So
yeah. Well, and we found some interesting things that's happened as a result of, the opening of the floodgates. Take Missouri, for instance. The state of Missouri had passed legislation that allowed players to make NIL money early if they signed to an in-state school. So if a player from Missouri signs to Tennessee, they can't. But if they sign to even Missouri State, who's actually reclassifying to FBS,
interesting.
I believe it's next year, they're joining Conference USA. They do get the benefit of having that in-state. So it's actually a way of skewing players to stay in state because they can make more money quicker than if they left.
With other states like Florida, California, Louisiana, Ohio, like those, that's a factor. That's a factor.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and they're trying to keep the Alabamas and the Ohio States from being able to take these guys out of Missouri.
Yeah,
because here's truth. University of Missouri, even though it's an SEC program, is not going to hold a candle to these blue blood programs that are just flush with money. Ohio State has $20 million to work on their NIL, whereas Missouri has a fraction of that. And correct. Then obviously you scale back to the smaller programs, like a Florida Atlantic, which would just have peanuts in comparison. And again, that goes back to the lack of a level playing field, just by design. Since the NCAA is just a loose association, each conference faces like its own league.
Yeah,
and you have a little confederation versus an actual combined league. So that's where part of that whole moving of FBS away from the NCAA would come into play. They want to try and level the playing field a bit for those schools. And the truth is, until the SEC is interested, which they are not, that's dead on arrival.
There you go. Independent leagues, all that more to come. I think that's a good place to stop because goodness knows that is a lot of information we just threw at the people at large, Drew Gluchov. And at the end of the day, this is a sports show. Let's talk a little sports. Let's do some picks, Drew.
Do it now.
Now.
Give me the picks. Do it now.
Hey, let's get the
Niners in this one.
Let's give Jennings some credit. But yeah, I get where you're coming from on all your previous points. This game to me is low-key interesting just because of where both teams are shaking out right now in their particular situations. In England, another one in. Thank you, Drew. But
It's your show. You're welcome.
that's right. That's what good guests do. But yeah, I have the Packers. The Houston Texans head over to Fox. For anybody picking the Patriots, I didn't think.
Now, do we even need to talk about this one?
Let's not. We won't even say we did. We're just not gonna. The Buccaneers head over to New Orleans to do battle with the Saints, assuming the Bucks can get out of the damn state. I guess. I don't.
Well, they're leaving early.
Okay,
They're scheduled to leave tomorrow, Tuesday.
There's your hurricane update.
Since we're recording on a Monday night, they're leaving Tuesday to get ahead of the storm and head up there. So this game is still scheduled to go on. I have the Buccaneers in this one. I think the fact this hurricane is happening is actually going to galvanize this team. Mm-hmm. Very different dynamics than during the Tom Brady era. This is a very emotionally driven team behind Baker Mayfield. And, I think that emotion is going to drive them to actually do better than they normally would have in regular circumstances.
Drew, that's a great analysis to pick the Bucks. I'm with you, but I'm doing it for a different reason. I'm living La Vida Vea. He's healthy again. He's going to smash some things, and David Carr is going to be in trouble. I, too, have the Buccaneers. The Cleveland Browns do battle with another struggling team, it would seem, the Philadelphia Eagles. Drew.
It all depends on who Cleveland starts at quarterback. If it's Deshaun Watson, they're going to
is playing in this game. I'm more worried, but I'm with you. No matter what happens, the mayonnaise messiah or whoever the backup is now isn't going to get it done with Tennessee. I've been trashing Tennessee the whole time, and the two Tennessee Titans people that I know who write for the cover of the team, I should say, told me how wrong I was, and now I'm laughing hard. Anyways, the Chargers and the Broncos. Drew, I'm going to lead this by saying my lock of the week last week on the Huddle Up podcast was that Bo Nix, that you shouldn't nix Bo because Bo Nix will continue his winning streak. He did exactly that last week. I looked incredibly smart for 30 seconds. It was pretty awesome. But Jim Harbaugh and company heads to town. Who you got, Drew?
Well, I've been disappointed with the Chargers. This is a talented team that just should be delivering more than they are. I think this is a good opportunity for a bounce back game. They just came on, they had a bye week. They're able to get a little healthy and come back with in force. I've got the Chargers in this one.
I'm with you, Drew. And listen, I love me some Harbaugh style football, but to come in immediately and play Harbaugh style football without a year to develop that roster that can properly play Harbaugh style football and stay healthy doing it isn't something that happens right away.
For the record, I can't stand Jim Harbaugh.
Hashtag you problem, hippie. Anyways,
Uh, you've got Detroit, who's still pretty hot. They're 3-1. Going against Dallas. this past week.
Details.
Cincinnati is way too talented to be 1-4. They can't. Dan Snyder.
Okay, we'll leave that alone. So with that in mind, for all my criticism of Josh Allen and how much an alleged concussion may have impacted Josh Allen's performance against the Texans to go, what was it, 9 of 30? Good gravy. I expect Josh Allen to be better than that. I expect the Jets' defense to be worse. I expect the Bills to be far more formidable from the defensive tackle spot to crush Aaron Charles Rodgers. Maybe he survives for longer than 4 snaps, but I, too, have the Bills winning that AFC West matchup.
East.
What'd I say?
West. You're all over the place. You got the Niners on the mind because you're going NFC West.
Maybe I was like Liz Dexick right there and switched them up. Anyways,
Dexia is real.
Liz Dexia, that's correct. With that in mind, Drew, feel free to tell the world where you can be found.
You can find me on Twitter at StatBoyDrew, as well as on Last Word on Sports or Last Word on College Football. I am a peer of Kyle's in that we both covered the UCF football nights. And, both of us put out good work. Check both of us out, our work. And, till next time.
Yeah, great times. By the way, if you don't go to Last Word on Sports, go to sportsreference.com. Apparently, the SEO finds his articles there if you look up a UCF player. Fun fact. So,
I cannot confirm or deny what I do to do such things.
Oh, my gosh. Listen, I just don't, nobody has pictures or what you do doesn't involve something that has a similar name to a network that has the WWE on it. Anyways, course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at the SOTG. Find me also on Facebook as a student of the game. Check out my writings with the Fans First Sports Network covering the Jacksonville Jaguars, as well as the Black and Gold Banneret covering the aforementioned UCF Knights. Okay, so Hoops Media Day is delayed a week, but we're getting there. Of course,
they're slight distraction.
Yeah, I mean,
we're just hoping there's a game this weekend.
I just hope there's a game.
We just want to win a game.
Media
Playoffs.
Day. Media
Playoffs.
Day. I just want there to be a game. No. Wow. I did not have the Jim Morris Sr. Clip in mind, but here we go.
Expect the unexpected, because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Never. With that in mind, of course, check out as well my there'll be writings as the preseason starts for the Orlando Magic. I have been blessed once again to return to the among the credentialed ranks for the Orlando Magic, so that should be fun. Look for that too. Writing that as well on Fans First Sports Network, and my podcast suite as well, including not only the Student of the Game podcast at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, but 7:30 leading into it, the Duval Dive with me and my friend Travis D. Holmes, by way, of course, of Fans First Sports Network. And check out the Black and Gold Bannerets podcast Night Shift. And, of course, you'll get the post-game reaction Saturday after the game against the Bearcats of Cincinnati with the Night Shift live. Find all that on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel. And my occasional appearances on the Huddle Up podcast, as well as the Student Game Report on Earnestly Speaking. I think that's everything. So, for my good friend Drew Gluchov, those of you listening to this in the Florida area, please, of course, stay as safe as you possibly can. And until next time, everyone, class dismissed.